Hello and welcome to Label Sessions Presents, the podcast where we talk to the most interesting people about all the things you need to know in the world of innovation, business design, tech, and culture. I'm Fuzlin Esau. Today we're joined by two new label mates and founder and MD of Label Sessions, Nick Sherrard. A big warm welcome to Felipe Matos. Felipe is a startup ecosystem builder, AI strategist, and venture capital expert who has played a pivotal role in shaping Brazil's innovation landscape. We're also joined by Tala Ansari. Tala is an innovation strategist and transformational change expert with a track record of driving large-scale corporate and ecosystem-level innovation at Atelier, World Expo 2020, and KPMG. As always, we're going to kick off with some AI. It's always in the news. So right now, AI can clone your voice, rewrite your photos. It's being alluded that it can generate government policy. So while OpenAI rolls out its next-gen image tools, we've also seen the Studio Ghibli aesthetic blow up on socials, and brands like H&M are using digital twins. And this is starting to bring up some interesting questions around responsible innovation, because we're also seeing indigenous developers using AI to preserve endangered languages. So we're stuck in this sort of dichotomy of what separates innovation from exploitation. So the question really is, how do we tell, or more importantly, how can we evaluate if an AI project is responsible or crossing the line? So we can. Nick, you look like you're ready to kick off.
I can't see your face, so I was just like, yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways to start on this one because there's so many big things to say. I mean, there's one side point on the responsibility question. I think a lot of the discussion around AI has become oddly kind of specific in the sense that there's so many very specific things to understand about AI, and there's very specific implications around AI. But there's a group of leaders I interact with who sometimes seem to think because it's an AI project, the normal rules of conduct don't apply. And I think, even on a basic level, there's real questions around the way in which the Studio Ghibli aesthetic was used and is being used in OpenAI. That's the thing for us to explore. There's a fundamental level, which is OpenAI used it as part of their communication. So as part of their launch campaign, showed the demonstration with Studio Ghibli, but appeared not to have communicated to Studio Ghibli that was going to happen, which is like a fundamental level of business. It's not like it's a sort of gray line. There's nobody, if any, all of our innovation programs, different parts of the world represented on this call, if we were ever involved in a program and someone launched a new product with a demonstration that had a massive impact for another big company or recognized brand, and nobody had communicated with them, then that person would be feeling they're probably not in that job that long, or there'd be an evaluation at the end of that where you go, that's just not the way we operate as a company, as a brand. But somehow AI, despite it being the most sensitive area in terms of massive implications of things to think through, seems to have been this space in which people don't operate with some of the kind of basics in place in terms of conduct. That's my kind of starting thought. I'm not quite sure why that is, and it seems like the opposite to what should be the case, but it somehow seems to be the state of play.
Yeah, I think on the Ghibli AI example, since that was, the hot topic of the week, I think sometimes we also, from, us experts from the innovation space, tend to forget that the general public don't have the same awareness that we do. So when the trend started hitting, I was very conscious not to upload my photos because I was thinking of privacy and how they'll be used and where that content will go. And I was also thinking of all the environmental, impact that would have with all these photos I was seeing popping up on Instagram and LinkedIn every few minutes. But friends that I was talking to, they just thought, they were like, this didn't cross our mind. We weren't exposed to this. We didn't think of this. And so I was one of few people who didn't get on the trend for those reasons. So I think there's still a gap in awareness when it comes to these elements. And we need to build more awareness around the impact of AI and privacy, the impact of AI in the environment, the impact of one prompt. Is it really worth having another cartoon photo and what that does to the planet? So things like that. I think once we spread that, then there'll be a lot more awareness around those components. But what it really made me think of, which I haven't thought of before, was the impact of AI in artists and what that does to their work. And when I saw the feedback from the artist and the Ghibli studios, I was quite disheartened because I felt like his lifetime of work suddenly just became commoditized for free.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me start thinking of questions that even we as experts who run innovation workshops should ask, would we be happy if AI is being used that way on our content, on our brand as companies? I think once we make these questions personal, we start to understand the impact of using these types of technology. And thinking, are we really rewarding innovation responsibly or not?
100%. And I think we've run into this sort of, and it also, the question becomes, should the creative industries or industry at large be setting clearer ethical boundaries before regulations catch up, or what is the?
Yeah, it's interesting though, and I want to get Felipe's view on this as well. But I do think one of the things that's really interesting on this is the world's just very confused around this topic, because to some level, music's been here before, right? So in terms of music, has a lot of norms now established around the idea that genres of music are repetitive to some degree. Like you kind of play into a genre, the pop song, the classic global pop song is a kind of 3-chord formula. And people have kind of set up guardrails around how that operates, what you can own, what you don't own, what's kind of fair use, what's not. And it's almost like in every other medium, we need to get to something that's similar or some kind of understanding, because there's almost like two extremes in the internet argument. It's either like some people seem to be saying that anything that we create as creatives, we own fully, and nobody can ever be influenced by, can ever use. That seems to be one position that's there. The other story, the other side senses that everything is in some beautiful commons, and therefore it's fine to reuse, and like no one should kind of have any sense of ownership at all. But we've got into a very confused conversation. But I maybe cut you off there, Felipe, because I know you're already close to this from more of a startup perspective and stuff. I don't know what your kind of sense of it is.
My take on this is that we are still in a very, very, very early stage of understanding the whole implications of AI. I think that AI is going to be even more transformative than the invention of the internet itself. So, I mean, it's really going to change everything, and most people are still playing with nice images on ChatGPT, while there's, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And of course, there are many implications, like ethical ones, even legal ones. I mean, there are things that, should or should not be allowed. Author rights, as we were saying, and probably the use cases will appear before regulation. I mean, many countries are trying to regulate at some degree, which I think is important as well. But probably we will face like many use cases that we were not thinking about, and they will tell us, what's acceptable, what's not, and then we have to go ahead and try to regulate it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as any tool, like AI is amazing. We can do so much good things with it, and obviously, as any tool, you could do many bad things with it as well. And that's like that's a problem, because since it's a very powerful tool and to some degree very unknown, because AI does things by itself, and we don't know exactly at what extent. It is extreme challenge for everyone to be able to understand it and take the best out of it while avoiding the scary side.
Yeah. I also think as well, there's something really interesting around just how new the possibilities are through AI. Because actually, one of the things I actually found, I'm not a massive Studio Ghibli fan, but I am, other hat on a board of a gallery and stuff. I'm interested in kind of visuals and all this kind of thing. I kind of found it interesting, like how interesting Studio Ghibli is, and yet how boring most of the images that were generated by people were. And like, there's kind of really interesting thing, which is I cannot believe that the future of this sort of form of entertainment is people generating visuals that look like Studio Ghibli or whichever animator they love. But I can believe that there's a future where Studio Ghibli and people like it create worlds that you can interact with that run in a different way. It's almost like there's this kind of awkward stage just now where all we're doing is kind of pirating and creating kind of slop versions of quite crafted things. And then there's this thing in the near future where you go, well, actually, this opens up all kinds of new possibilities and new formats and new ways to tell stories. And we're going to find some way of getting into that future and thinking it through a bit as to what does it mean in that world to be an author anymore? What's the actual thing you're creating?
No, I think you had raised a really important question, which was how can we actually tell if an AI project is responsible or not? And I think that's a really important question to discuss because we're going to get more of these, as Felipe said. So I think when you look at those projects and examples you've shared, a lot of those projects tend to ask, who does this technology help? But they actually don't ask, who does it harm? And that's something I realized when I looked at the Ghibli example, who does this harm? So I think it's important that now when we work with companies or government entities and look at different AI projects, we also have to ask, who does this AI harm? Does it cause more misinformation, more bias, so that we can really ensure that every AI project becomes a responsible AI project. It's kind of sad that we have to label it as responsible AI. We want to get to a point where all projects are just responsible AI projects in nature. So I just thought that, when you mentioned that point, it kind of sparked that idea in my head that it's also who does this harm that we need to ask as well.
It's a really good question to ask. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And we hope you're all caught up on the world of innovation this week. If you want to get access to label sessions for your brand or have our teams mentored by our leaders, get in touch via our website or any of the social networks around. Thank you, everyone.